The Iranian mobile launcher didn't even have time to pack up. Within 20 minutes of firing a deadly anti-ship missile at a US Navy destroyer, that launcher was nothing but a pile of scorched metal on a remote stretch of coastline. There was no debate, no diplomatic warning, and no hesitation. The Navy didn't just defend itself, it delivered a surgical, overwhelming response that sent a shockwave through the region. This wasn't a drill or a misunderstanding, it was a calculated act of aggression met with the terrifying precision of American carrier-based air power. The message was sent before the smoke from the original launch had even cleared. To understand why this escalation happened, you have to look at the map. The Strait of Hormuz is a geographic nightmare for any navy. At its narrowest, it is just 33 kilometers wide. That is the only gap connecting the Persian Gulf to the open ocean, and it is the single most important choke point on the entire planet. Through this tiny sliver of water flows roughly 20% of the world's entire oil supply every single day. We are talking about 21 million barrels of crude oil and liquefied natural gas. If that flow stops, global economies collapse. This isn't just a waterway, it is the jugular vein of the modern world. Imagine the pressure of that reality. Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Kuwait, and the UAE all rely on this one path to reach their customers. There is no plan B, no secret pipeline that can handle that volume, and no way to bypass the strait. Iran knows this perfectly well. Their entire military doctrine is built around the idea that they don't have to win a war against the United States. They just have to make operating in these waters so expensive and so dangerous that the US eventually decides it isn't worth the trouble. It is a strategy of constant, low-level pain designed to shake the world's confidence in American protection. Iran's naval force isn't built for a traditional ocean battle. They know a head-on fight with a US carrier strike group would be short and devastating for them. Instead, they've invested decades into asymmetric tools designed for shallow, cluttered coastal waters. They use fast attack boats, hidden naval mines, and massive swarms of drones, but their most dangerous assets are the anti-ship missiles hidden along their jagged coastline. These weapons are designed to fly just meters above the waves, staying below radar coverage until the very last second. It's a game of hide and seek where the stakes are a billion-dollar warship and the lives of hundreds of sailors. On the morning of the engagement, a US Navy destroyer was conducting what appeared to be a routine transit. The sun was just beginning to rise over the Persian Gulf, turning the water into a deep, deceptive orange. But there is no such thing as a routine day in the Strait of Hormuz. Tensions had been high for weeks following a series of incidents involving the harassment of commercial tankers. The destroyer wasn't just passing through, it was a visible signal of American resolve. Every sensor on the ship was active, and every member of the crew was at a state of heightened alert, prepared for the moment that the routine would turn into a fight for survival. The first sign of trouble didn't come from a visual sighting, it came from the ship's electronic warfare suite. Somewhere on the Iranian coast, a fire control radar went active. This wasn't a search radar just looking for traffic. This was a specialized system designed to lock onto a target and guide a weapon toward it. When those sensors detect that specific frequency hitting the hull, every alarm in the Combat Information Center goes off at once. This is the moment the clock starts. In the world of missile defense, those extra seconds of early detection are the difference between a successful intercept and a catastrophic hole in the side of the ship. The Iranian side had made a choice. They launched a sea-skimming anti-ship missile directly at the destroyer. These weapons are terrifying because they drop to an altitude of just a few meters almost immediately after launch. By hugging the surface of the water, they use the curvature of the earth and the clutter of the waves to hide from long-range radar. The goal is to give the target as little warning as possible. If you can fire enough of them at once, the hope is to overwhelm the ship's defenses through pure saturation. But the Iranian operators underestimated the speed and sophistication of the Aegis combat system waiting for them on the other side. The ship's Spy-1 radar, a massive phased array system, picked up the incoming threat within seconds of its launch. On the glowing screens inside the Combat Information Center, a new track appeared. It was classified immediately: anti-ship missile, inbound, high velocity. The time to impact was calculated at under 4 minutes. To a person on the street, 4 minutes might sound like plenty of time to react. In a naval engagement, 4 minutes is a frantic race against physics. The crew has to verify the data, confirm it isn't a sensor ghost, and prepare a response while the threat is screaming toward them at hundreds of miles per hour. Every second of those 4 minutes is a high-pressure decision point. If you engage a target that turns out to be a civilian aircraft or a false return, you've sparked an international disaster. If you hesitate for even 10 seconds on a real missile, your ship might not survive the hit. This is where the Aegis system proves its worth. It is designed to compress this decision cycle, tracking hundreds of targets and prioritizing the most dangerous threats automatically. It doesn't pull the trigger, but it ensures that the commanding officer has the exact information needed to make the call. The order was given: engage the inbound threat. From the forward deck of the destroyer, an SM-2 Standard missile erupted from its vertical launch cell. In a cloud of fire and smoke, it accelerated to supersonic speeds in an instant, arching into the sky before diving back toward the horizon. The Aegis system was actively steering the interceptor via a data link, making real-time adjustments as the Iranian missile attempted its own terminal maneuvers. Modern missiles aren't just dumb rockets, they are programmed to weave and dodge in their final seconds to confuse defenses. But the SM-2 was smarter, calculating exactly where the threat would be and leading it into a collision course. The intercept happened approximately 2 kilometers from the destroyer's hull. There was a brief, violent flash on the horizon as the two missiles collided. A clean kill. The debris fell harmlessly into the Persian Gulf, and the destroyer continued its transit as if nothing had happened. But while the physical threat was gone, the engagement was far from over. In the past, a successful defense might have been the end of the story. Not this time. The US Navy has learned that absorbing an attack without a response only invites more aggression. To maintain deterrence, the cost of firing that missile had to be paid immediately. The location of the launch site was never a mystery. The destroyer's sensors had recorded every detail of the Iranian fire control radar, including its exact waveform and its precise geographic coordinates. There was zero ambiguity about who fired and from where. Even as the SM-2 was in the air, fighter aircraft from the nearby carrier strike group were already rolling off the deck. They had launched as a defensive precaution the moment the initial alert went out, but now they had a new mission. They weren't just patrolling anymore. They were the instrument of a precise and rapid retaliatory strike. The orders were clear: destroy the source of the attack. 2 aircraft banked toward the Iranian coastline carrying precision-guided munitions. Finding a mobile missile launcher is usually like finding a needle in a haystack because they are designed to move and hide in rugged terrain. However, the act of firing a missile is a massive giveaway. The heat signature and the radar emissions provided a roadmap directly to the target. The Iranian crew likely thought they could fire and disappear into the hills before a response could be organized. They were wrong. They had less than 20 minutes before the sky fell on them. The pilots identified the mobile launcher almost immediately. It was attempting to relocate, but it wasn't fast enough. A single precision strike turned the multi-million-dollar weapon system into a burning wreck. During the approach, the pilots identified a second missile battery nearby that was being prepped for action. To prevent a follow-up attack, that system was also taken out. The entire sequence, from the moment the Iranian radar locked onto the destroyer to the moment the retaliatory strike was complete, took less than 20 minutes. It was a masterclass in rapid response and integrated naval warfare. This engagement demonstrates why the US Navy spends billions on technology and thousands of hours on training. It wasn't just about one ship surviving a missile. It was about the seamless connection between the destroyer, the carrier, the satellites, and the aircraft. This invisible infrastructure is what allows the Navy to operate in such a high-threat environment. When the data links work, the entire strike group acts as a single organism. The destroyer sees the threat, the carrier provides the punch, and the intelligence network coordinates the kill. It is a level of sophistication that most regional powers simply cannot match. But there is a deeper strategic lesson here. Deterrence only works if the consequences are real, swift, and credible. By wiping out the launch site in under half an hour, the Navy sent a message to every commander on the Iranian side. If you pull the trigger, you lose your equipment. You gain no glory, you do no damage, and you lose your ability to fight back. This precision is intended to prevent a larger war. By responding to a small provocation with a focused but devastating strike, the US aims to convince the adversary that a full-scale escalation would be a suicidal mistake for their regime. Most people never hear about these incidents, they don't make the front pages of newspapers, and there are rarely official press conferences to discuss them. The military prefers to keep these engagements quiet to avoid forced escalations and to protect operational security. But just because they aren't televised doesn't mean they aren't happening. The Strait of Hormuz is a theater of constant invisible warfare where electronic signals and radar pulses are the primary weapons. Every day, U.S. sailors are playing a high-stakes game of chess against an opponent that is always looking for a weakness to exploit. The Iranian strategy is evolving too. They know they lost this round, so they are looking for ways to bypass the Aegis system's defenses. They are developing longer-range missiles, experimenting with swarm tactics using hundreds of small boats, and building cheaper drones that can be launched in massive numbers. The goal is to find the saturation point, the moment where a ship simply runs out of interceptors to fire. It is a grinding competition between an offense that only needs to be right once and a defense that has to be perfect every single time. The pressure on the crews in the strait is immense and never-ending. The electronic dimension of this fight is perhaps the most fascinating part. The fact that the destroyer's sensors could identify the specific waveform of the Iranian radar before the missile even launched shows how advanced signals intelligence has become. The U.S. has a library of electronic signatures for almost every weapon system in the world. The moment a radar turns on, the ship's computer knows exactly what it is, who made it, and how to defeat it. This invisible war for the electromagnetic spectrum is where the real advantage lies. Whoever controls the airwaves controls the outcome of the kinetic battle. When you look at the cost of these operations, it's easy to wonder if it's all worth it. Each SM-2 interceptor cost millions of dollars. The fuel for the jets, the maintenance for the destroyers, and the deployment of a carrier strike group represent a massive investment of taxpayer resources. But the alternative is far more expensive. If the US Navy pulled out of the Strait of Hormuz today, the global economy would be at the mercy of whoever decided to close the gate. The price of oil would skyrocket, insurance rates for shipping would become unaffordable, and the resulting global recession would cost trillions. The reality of global power is that it requires a constant visible presence in the world's most dangerous places. The destroyer's transit wasn't just a move on a map, it was an insurance policy for the global economy. Every time a ship successfully defends itself and retaliates against an attacker, it reinforces the status quo that keeps trade moving. It is a thankless, dangerous job that happens in the middle of the night or the early hours of the morning, far away from the eyes of the public. The sailors on those ships are the ones holding the line between global commerce and total chaos. As tactics continue to evolve, the US Navy is already looking toward the next generation of defense. Laser weapons, high-powered microwaves, and autonomous interceptors are all being tested to deal with the growing threat of drone swarms and hypersonic missiles. The game is changing, and the margin for error is getting smaller every year. The Strait of Hormuz will remain a flashpoint for the foreseeable future, as geography and politics collide in one of the most volatile regions on Earth. The contest for control of these narrow waters is a permanent feature of modern geopolitical competition. The next time you see the price of fuel at the pump or hear about the stability of the global markets, remember that it isn't just a matter of supply and demand. It is the result of a high-tech shield and a ready-to-strike sword operating in the shadows of the Persian Gulf. The Strait of Hormuz stays open because the cost of closing it is made unmistakably clear every time someone tries to test the US Navy's resolve. If you want to stay informed on the real stories behind global military events and the technology that shapes our world, hit the subscribe button. We'll see you in the next one.